No niin, hyvä radioamatööriyleisö. On ilo kutsua tänne lavalle meidän aamupäivän viimeinen tähtivieras. Ja hän on Peter Hultqvist, joka on aikoinaan ruotsalainen journalisti ja nykyisin Ruotsin sosiaalidemokraattisen työväenpuolueen poliitikko. Erittäin pitkäaikainen kansanedustaja. Peter toimi puolustusministerinä 8 vuotta vuodesta 2014 aina lokakuuhun 2022. Ja hän on istunut valtiopäivillä itse asiassa vuodesta 2006 ja johtanut myös esimerkiksi puolustusvaliokuntaa useita vuosia. Låt oss välkomna Peter sm4hcf. Vi är mycket glada över att ha dig här. Ja om det passar dig, vi ska använda engelska och däremellan pratar jag finska om det är okej. Eli otetaan pienet taputukset tervetulleeksi Peter. So you are a prominent politician in the Social Democratic Party of Sweden and a long-time Minister of Defense, 8 years. That's a huge achievement. And from that position, you witnessed the beginning of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And we continue about that a bit later, but let's open a little bit. One reason that you are here in Vierumäellä is that you are visiting very often with your wife here in Finland. Is it so?
Yes, and when I was a child, I visited Finland every summer together with my family, and my mother, she is from Kuusamo in the northern part of Finland, Säkkilenjärvi to be exact. And she came from a family of farmers up there, and she came to Sweden during the Second World War. Finland sent a lot of children to Sweden during that time, and she came to Sweden, and after that she has remained in Sweden, but kept up the contacts with the relatives in Finland. So when I grew up, I used a lot of time here. And now on all the days I'm also here together with Anne, and in the summer and also New Year and also different weekends during the year. So, and I also closely follow the development in Finland, and during my years as minister I had a lot of contacts with first Jussi Niinistö, he was defense minister, and then Antti Kaikkonen. But the first one for a short while was Carl Haglund. So I have cooperated with 3 Finnish ministers.
Do you feel, Peter, that you have some kind of better knowing of Finnish mentality because you have roots here in Finland?
That is not for me to answer. I think that is something for others to comment or think about, but I have a good feeling around Finland, and one of my goals when I became minister in Sweden was now we must make a situation when Finland and Sweden are very close in defense questions, that we operate together, plan together, and connect each other's defense forces as close as we could. And also that we try to have a security policy in a similar way. So that was the way I tried to work in, and I think we did a lot together. And there was also a support for it in the government that I represented during 8 years.
Okay, we go back to politics after a while, but let's talk about a little bit about your childhood. Your mother was sotalapsi. Yeah, like my mother as well. But my mother returned to Finland and your mother stayed in Sweden. So in which part of Sweden you have been living your childhood?
I am grown up in Borlänge, in the middle of Sweden, we can say 250 kilometers from Stockholm. And that is a town that we have a steel factory there, and we had a paper mill. It's not existing anymore, but these 2 industries was dominating this area. And We also had a lot of Finnish immigrants there because of they moved from Finland to our town to work. And we have also Finnish-speaking parts in the steel factory. Only Finnish people that work there. So there was a lot of influences. We have a sm4hcf in Borlänge. We have also a social democratic party organization for Finnish people. Not anymore, but when I grew up, we have it. And so there have been a lot of influence from people with a background in Finland in my hometown.
What about in your childhood, in your home, at your home? Did you speak Finnish?
No, we didn't speak Finnish. It was Swedish all over the place. And but we visited Finland, and we visited my relatives and my cousins and my mother's brothers and sisters and so on. So we have that close connection. She speaks Swedish. She speaks Finnish, but I didn't learn, and that is something that I regret. But I'm not dead yet, so we will see if I can make a rehabilitation in that question. But it's not so easy with the Finnish language. But I think when I'm in Finland, it works very well with English.
Oh yeah. And Peter, you have now extraordinary career as a politician in Sweden. But before that, you were a journalist. Is it so? Was the politics also involved in your journalistic career?
Yes, we can say like that. I started in a milk factory, and I continued to be some sort of salesman for grass cutters and the things you have when you try to deal with things in your garden. And after that, when I worked at the milk factory for a while, there was a job on our local social democratic paper that no one were interested in. And it was up in the northern part of our constituency, worked 30 hours a week. Älvdalens kommun, I don't know if anybody recognizes that name, but it's a big community in the area, but not so much of population. And but when that job was free, I tried to get it, and that was also the reality. At the same time, I was very active in local social democratic organizations and youth organizations, and I have started on the newspaper to write small articles about some events and about movies and that sort of things, and that started some sort of steps into the newspaper. But when this job popped up, I took the chance because my feeling was that can be more interesting than the milk factory in the future. So it started in that way. So it was a coincidence, we can say.
So what about, how did you find amateur radio as a hobby?
I was very fascinated. It was a teacher on my school that were ham radio person. He had a signal sugar mic for Charlie Golf Mike. Inge Johansson was his name. He was teacher in technical questions, and he was radio amateur, and he took his equipment to the school and put up an antenna and showed us young people a new part of the world. And at the same time, we were a group of boys that were very interested in listening to shortwave radio stations. This was a very interesting time because we have Swedish-speaking radio stations, what I remember, in Warsaw, in Moscow, in East Berlin, in West Germany, in Italy, in Vatican State, and also in Finland, and Ecuador, and Japan. There was also some more, Tirana, Albania. So, and all these Eastern Bloc, they were propaganda stations, we can say. So we could, in a very young age, we followed a little bit of the Cold War by shortwave radio, but we also tried to listen to radio stations all over the world and send listening reports and got these QSL cards back and collected all this. It was a very fascinating hobby, and it's very close to amateur radio. So when this teacher showed us his equipment and all of these things, my feeling was I should have it and I must take a license. So I collected all the money I could and buy some sort of education in telegraphy.
Oh, yeah.
From SRAL, the Swedish amateur radio organization. And then I listened to this telegraphy, I think it was 40 bands. And I listened to that and tried and got written down and I learned it. And then I also had a book about radio technology and tried to learn myself about that. And then I was to a local regiment and make some sort of test. And then I got my signal 1975.
So, during your time as a politician, have you had time for the hobby?
Yeah, first years after I took my license, I used a lot of time. I have a transmitter 10 watts, and it was a crystal, an old-fashioned crystal thing, and learned a lot about technology, radio technology in practice. I have a dipole antenna, I remember, and then when I started to work more and more and were more engaged in politics and also in the local newspaper, it petered out in some way. So I was QRT for many years. Then I became municipal commissioner or mayor, or what is called it, full-time politician in my hometown. After 2 years there, a local radio amateur, Sierra Mike 4, Charlie Quebec, Lennart Hane, an old friend of mine, he said that you cannot only work and be at a municipality, you must do something else, because otherwise you will die. So, and I say, I have forgotten the CV, I don't remember, I cannot do this again, it's over. But he came back with that, you have to do it, and he gave me I think summer is the right name in English, and a key. And start training now with this and come back. And I tried a little and it wasn't so complicated. I came back and then I bought a new equipment from him and then I started again. I think I was QRT 21 years.
Well, that's very familiar. I have the same experience, and I think that in our audience we have also the same kind of experiences. Yes. But are you now active?
Yes, and after that I was very active for some years. I worked stations all around the world, but when I became minister, then it was problematic because it was not time for it. I made some QSU from time to time, but it was a little bit hard to uphold the hobby. But now I have invested in a new equipment, so I have an ICOM 7300 and a G5 Radio Victor antenna here in Finland. And so the last weeks I have worked around 25 to 30 other stations.
Wow.
So it's something.
Now we can give you an applause to the speaker. Well, served a very long 8 years as a defense minister of Sweden, and this week here we had this NATO summit in Vilna, and also yes, President Joe Biden met all the Scandinavian prime ministers here in Helsinki. How would you describe now the present mood in Sweden about the NATO process, which left now Sweden a little bit behind Finland?
Yes, this was not so easy to change some sort of attitude towards the security problem that we have had for 200 years. If we see to the Cold War, we were non-allied and wanted to be neutral in a war situation. And most of the strategy was also something we have done connected to the Finnish situation, because Finland was, after the Second World War, forced to this agreement with the Soviet Union about some sort of friendship agreement or pact, or what we should call it. That was not the Finnish will, but it was no alternative. And our position was that we cannot go into NATO, because then we will have a very dangerous situation in Finland, because then the Soviets maybe will do something more than this agreement, and it will be a very hardship situation here, and we will have the Iron Curtain directly in the Baltic Sea, and we didn't want to have that situation. So because of that, we have the non-alignment and the ambition to be neutral in the war. Then, when I was minister, together with Finland, we tried to develop a situation to deepening our cooperation as deep it was possible to do it. And at the same time, we together made agreement with the United States about deeper defense cooperation. We deepened the Nordic cooperation inside the Nordic Defense Cooperation, NORDEFCO. We also deepened the ties with United Kingdom and other European countries, and also being very active in the NATO partnership. So we built this security network, and I must say that my feeling was that we did it together. Then we came to the war situation. It started with uphill around Ukraine with the Russian troops. Then the 17th of December 2021, before Christmas, then they sent a letter from Kremlin to the countries around in Europe and also Sweden and Finland, when they say that they wanted to have a direct influence in our security decisions and in our security strategy. And they said that Russia must be respected in some way. And our feeling was that this is totally unacceptable, because we make our own decisions. We are sovereign states, and we do not want to live in the shadow from Moscow. That was the feeling. And the answer was coordinated in Europe. And that was that we are not interested. We said no, all of us. Then we came to 24th of February and the war started. Then things happened very, very fast.
I must interrupt now and ask you, you have probably been asked before many times, but how did you feel then 24th of February 2022? Did you expect that this kind of Russian aggression will happen?
Yes. I wasn't so surprised, because you don't build up with all these troops around the country if you don't mean something. That is not an exercise. My feeling around this started in the spring of 2021, because Russia, they had huge exercises at the Ukrainian border, but they left the material at the border. So they didn't take the material away from there. And when the Saddam built up its forces at the border, then it was in a way with a huge, deep and complexity, in a way that you didn't do that on exercises. So this was something else. But my first feelings around that this is not exercise, it was spring 2021. But it's also divided, because you hope that these bad things will not happen, but on the same time you see a development when you realize that they build up for war. So I cannot say that I was surprised.
Well, to add to my question is, were you surprised that they were also trying to get into Kiev? Or did you thought that they were only looking for the eastern parts of Ukraine?
No, I think they want to crush Ukraine. They want to take over the society. That was the plan. And they see Ukraine as Russia. They don't recognize that Ukrainian is an own language. They don't see that Ukraine have their own culture. They want to dominate, and they feel that this is ours. So that is the view of Putin. And if you read, and if we read what Putin have written and said about Ukraine during the last years, it's very easy to see that this is Russia, this is not Ukraine. And if you have that view, then you have a problem. Then it will be war if you want to do something. So he created the situation.
Well, what happened here in Finland, we all know that the public opinion, which had been so far against NATO membership, very suddenly changed, and we hurried towards to leave the NATO membership. How was the feeling after the Russian aggression started? How was it in Sweden? What kind of development there happened with the public opinion about the NATO membership?
I think it changed in favor of NATO, but not as fast as it did in Finland. The process was faster in Finland, and I think that there was a huge flashback also from the Second World War and the Winter War. And I think that the feeling was not alone one more time. That was my view about it. It came also, in Sweden it was a slower process. And Finland's decision was very important for Sweden and had a direct impact. And from my view, it was, I tried to analyze it from a military perspective, and my view was that it's impossible to make an effective military planning for the Nordic countries and also for Sweden if Finland go to NATO and we are out. It's impossible to have that sort of situation from a military point of view, and the next step in that is also that from a security policy point of view it will be impossible. We tried to balance both Sweden and Finland to be outside NATO in a way that we wanted to reduce tension in our part of Europe. That was the goal, but we were not naive, so we upgraded military capability, deepening the cooperation with others without this membership. But when Russia then increased the tension up to the highest level since the Second World War, then they changed the situation, and because of that, NATO was the alternative.
In the NATO process, supporting Finland and Sweden, your party, Social Democratic Party here in Finland, also in Sweden, they were quite important factors that this membership went to the NATO. How much was there cooperation and coordination between the parties, social democratic parties of Finland and Sweden?
We talked with each other several times, and we also met, and we also had a direct meeting between the part of the Swedish government and part of the Finnish government, and the President of Finland were also there. So it was a process that we worked with together, I have to say, and we took it step by step. And the conclusion in the end of this was that we had to apply for membership in NATO.
How disappointed in Sweden, Swedish public was, or was it when Finland's application was accepted but not Swedish by the Turkish President Erdogan?
I don't know if I should say that disappointment. I think more of tired of it. That feeling that Turkey, they have some sort of bargaining here and wanted to have more from us than they wanted from Finland, and that they have some sort of agenda that were not so easy to have the full view of what it was. And it's not the first time that there have been this sort of situation with Turkey in NATO. When Fogh Rasmussen for some years ago he was elected as General Secretary, this was before Stoltenberg, then there was a lot of demands from the Turkish side. So this is not the first time, and I think now that now they have some sort of agreement again in Vilnius, and now they have said that they will decide maybe in the parliament in October, and I don't know what will happen during that time, but from my perspective, I will say Sweden fulfill all standards to be a NATO member. There is no problems or hesitations around that. Now it's up to NATO to deliver the membership. We cannot be involved in any more so-called negotiations. And now they have to take it, or I don't want to say leave it, but there is up to NATO to prove now that open door policy is a reality. And I think also that the result in Vilnius in some way show that, because now also Erdogan must show that he stands for his words. So he must stand for his word now, and Hungary too.
This is a good ending of this conversation. Now in the audience you have the possibility to ask questions from Peter. Anybody? Raise your hand there.
Hello. What do you think the situation will be in the next few weeks, months in Ukraine? How do you think that will end up, and how soon?
You said how the security will be in Ukraine. Yes. What I see of the situation is that the Ukrainians, step by step, they are going forward and they take new positions in a positive way. They are doing a very hard job there. There is a very hard frontline situation, and they pay a very high price in this war. And I think that if we not continue with the support to Ukraine, then there will be a bad situation for them in the long run. But if we continue, they can be victorious in the end of this. So this depends a lot on what the European Union, the European countries, and what the United States are doing. So we must support Ukraine, and I see positive steps. Then on the Russian side, there is a lot of signals of that they have problems.
Hello, it's Julie Papa. Just for curiosity, how do you see the role of ham radio as a hobby in Sweden? Is it well recognized or very widely known in the society, and do hams have a special role in emergency communication in Swedish preparedness organization for crisis time?
I think we have around 10,000 ham radio licenses in Sweden. It's a lot, and I think that SSR, the Swedish Amateur Radio Organization, is a strong and well-working organization. And I think that it's a high quality and a high level of technological knowledge in the amateur radio group in Sweden. I see that more can be done to involve them in what we can call readiness in the Swedish society. I think that some of them are connected to voluntary organizations we have in the armed forces. And we have one organization with, I think, 3,200 members named Voluntary Radio Organization. And they have also specific duties in a crisis or a wartime situation. I also think that some of our local radio clubs are connected to local readiness organizations in both civilian and wartime crisis. So there is some connections, but I think more can be done to make a role for the radio amateurs in this readiness organization in Sweden. In Sweden we have a lot to do to build up the civilian defense again that were reduced when the Cold War was over.
Any more questions?
I'm sure as a defense minister you have had plenty of interesting experiences, but could you relate what has been your most interesting experience in ham radio so far?
Very good question. I think that one of my biggest biggest and best feelings was when I was successful so I could get an amateur radio license. That was something big for me, because I have worked with this telegraphy knowledge and also to read these books about radio technology and try to understand all of this. And I was not so old, I think I was 15 years old at that time. So 16 maybe. So that was a great moment. And if I want to do a flashback, I think that was the biggest feeling I ever had. Then I have done a lot. I have taken awards for DXCC and ADXA and a lot of awards around the world and worked many countries and so on. But I haven't had so strong feeling as I had when I got the license.
Okay, Oscar Hotel 5 Bravo, Mike. Yes, as a defense minister, maybe you have heard something about Stella Polaris. And I have been thinking that what really happened, all of those thousands of papers which were put in from Finland to Sweden in a time, and, are they really burned? And do you have anything else to tell about the Stella Polaris, which we do not maybe know?
Stella Polaris was a very special operation in the end of the World War II. A lot of Finnish intelligence staff and their families planned to go to Sweden and also did it. And we also we got a lot of experience but also material from the Finnish intelligence that we could use on the Swedish side, and all these archives, they ended up in private home in Värmland, that part of Sweden, and then it took its own ways somewhere. I think there is a museum now about this in Nälkäs. And I was one of the speakers on Skype on the inauguration of that museum, and I have an idea to go there and plan to go there and see the museum. Stella Polaris was a very huge and interesting operation, and it's something to remember in the history, but I don't know all the deepest secrets around it. So I cannot deliver anything more than that is written.
So, now, Peter, I would like to ask, I have now noticed that you are spending more and more time here in Finland in summertime and in your holidays, so is it possible that you will apply a Finnish license?
I already have a Finnish license.
Ah, okay. So,
Oscar Hotel 1 Papa.
okay, great. And now we can, as a word from audience, I can say that we believe that the Swedish defense are in good hands, because almost the same time a year ago I interviewed the chief of staff of Swedish Army, and she had similar background as you have. So we are in good hands with Finland and Sweden. I like to thank you, Peter, SM4, Hotel Charlie Fox, and we give a big applause.